Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Berkshire, Director of Technical Services here at CTC, and today we are entering part 2 of the 5-part series about cleaning your projects and maintaining corporate standards with CTC tools. So, but before we begin, just want to remind everyone that I encourage you all to please ask questions at any point during the presentation today using the questions panel. I'll make sure to keep my eye on it and answer questions as I can during the presentation. Anything that's left over or asked at the end, I will make sure to answer at that time. And secondly, this will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel shortly after the presentation has concluded. And with that said, let's get going. So, in this 5-part series, we're discussing how, maintaining a project file or a Revit project can be time-consuming, can be disruptive to the process, and if not done on a regular basis, can be detrimental to the project, especially during, deadline days or print days. That's usually when these issues occur, or at least come to a head and bring us all to a standstill. So the series is meant to show us, or to show you all tools in workflows in the CTC product line that allow you to simplify the entire process and to stay ahead of the game. So last week, series 1 was all about data collection. Today, we are talking about tools that will assist in managing some of the cleanup with imports and links and with various elements in the models themselves. So first, the issues then, they're difficult to administer. Most standards that we implement are easy to do, but are time consuming and can be tedious to set up, especially to deploy if projects are already in place. There's nothing for enforcement out there today, at least natively in Revit, right? And tracking and managing them over time and kind of seeing what reoccurring issues keep popping up and how we can deal with that, without manually writing that stuff down. There really isn't much natively available that can be done to assist with that. So we're covering a bunch of tools throughout this 5-part series. Last week, we discussed Model Compare, Project Snapshot Exporter, and the Project Activity Logger tools, and how to collect the data and review the data within, Power BI or spreadsheet or on our dashboards online. This week, we're going to recap that and show you Import Link Manager, Dimension Checker, and Project Cleaner. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to talk about the rest of the tools that you see here. And actually, there's a few missing from this list that we'll be covering. So we're doing a lot in the next 5 weeks, next 5 weeks. So today, specifically, we're going to do our recap, review how links and imports can be managed within our models, how, quick ways to purge elements out that don't need to be there that we found out that shouldn't be there, and how to deal with poor dimension overrides specifically. And we're just going to jump right into it. There's no point in showing you guys a bunch of screenshots when I can just show you the tools. So first of all, I'm going to jump back and do a quick little recap. We used last week, let me just open up our model here. We used Model Compare from the BIM project suite to compare different versions of a Revit file to see what's changed, right? So maybe the file size increased and you want to know drastically, and you wanted to know why. And if you've been taking snapshots on, say, like on a semi-regular basis, like maybe every week or every other week, we'd be able to compare those two together to see what's new and what has changed over the course of 2 weeks. It's very much, it's not very easy on the eyes at times, right? It's just, we're basically reviewing spreadsheets at this point, but they're color coded and we can kind of put them side by side and review the differences. So model compare was one tool we reviewed. Snapshot exporter is another tool that we took a look at. This one allows us to take the same model compare data. It's effectively doing the same thing as model compare with the snapshots. However, it's putting it into a SQL Server database that can be managed using SQL Server Management Studio and then reviewed in a couple of different fashions. So there's a number of different ways to do that. One way being directly in the SQL Server Management Studio session itself, where you get a lot of linear data. It can be very hard to read, and if you may, it could be very dangerous to be up in here manipulating things. So we don't normally let people have access to this, and nor would any sort of SQL admin. So that's where Power BI comes into play, or a Tableau, or Domo, or Google Analytics, or whatever you want, really. We have specifically provided Power BI templates that, because it's free, right? And it makes it really easy. And it's a little kind of on the entry level side of things, even though it's really powerful. So here we can go ahead and check out things about our snapshots from Project Snapshot Exporter to see different things about the project file and the snapshots taken on at certain points, and get information about the families that are loaded in, how many are placed, and of each category, and then each individual instance, right? So we can kind of really start to nickel and dime this a bit and get a pretty good idea as to what's in the model and what's wrong with the model. So, and we also lastly talked about Project Activity Logger, which is a service that comes with the BIM data suite or Hive. And that service runs silently in the background during Revit usage. And when sync to central happens, data is extracted, recorded, and pushed to a database. If the Project Activity Logger comes from Data Suite, it also goes to a SQL database, the same SQL database that the snapshots do, and there's a separate Power BI file for that review. If it's with PAL, it will go to the web portal, and you can either review the data on your dashboard. So if I just pop back in here to my dashboard real quick, you can review project data here and get a project summary, see who's in the model the most, and various other bits and pieces of information. There's a nice little overview of everything, and we can get performance information, some detail, minor detail, but it's enough to give us an idea of where the problem may be coming from, or potentially, if you're monitoring this, when the problem occurred. So alternatively, instead of, if you want a little bit more control, we have opened the door for the Hive API. And for those that want kind of that direct access to it, you can have that now and either use the Power BI file that we are supplying, or you can utilize an application, a web app called Postman, to get the hard data and push it into your own SQL Server environment to be utilized as you see fit. So there's options, and there's webinars on that portion on getting direct access to the Hive API and all of your data if you want it. That webinar was done by Sean Zerbis about a month ago now, 6 weeks maybe. So look into it, and if you have questions about that, reach out. So now that we've captured all the data, now we get into dealing with the information that we found. So for example, let's say I found out that in this snapshot that I took of a Revit file, we have two dimension tabs for figuring out how many different dimension types are in a project, and getting some information about the individual segments themselves. One of the key fields in here that we have is an override field. And in this case, it's telling me that a number of these dimensions were indeed overridden with another dimensional value, or in some cases, just a period, which likely means there's a text note over the top of it that shouldn't be there, right? So for those of you that know how to do this, you can fake a dimension in Revit, even though you're not supposed to be able to. There's loopholes. And so there's ways to do it. And what should be 10 foot 7 3/8 is labeled as 10 foot 6. Doing that across the board is a huge no-no. And now I may be off by a foot in certain portions of my model. So now I can take this information, go back to my project file, and deal with it. And that's the whole point of this, is to be able to easily review some of this information in smaller charts and tables or graphs and address the situation. So now I can jump into Revit, go to one of my floor plans here that has dimensions in it, and open up Dimension Checker. Dimension Checker is part of a manager suite, and actually all the tools that I'm talking about today, specifically with Dimension Checker, Import Link Manager, and I didn't mean to click that yet, but it's a free tool called Project Cleaner, is also here in the manager suite. So we're kind of keeping everything in one basket today. And with Dimension Checker, we can now rescan the file just by hitting search, getting a handle of every single dimension that's placed in this file and where those overrides are. And if it'll tell you exactly where everything is, what view it's in, if it's a dimension string, which segment within that string has been modified, because you can do just one, it doesn't have to be all of them, right? So this one was overridden with the period, kind of hard to see there, but it was. Who knows what the note is at this point? So now we can deal with it. So when I select one of these issues here, I have the ability to hit select, and sometimes I'll get lucky and see it right out of the gate. If I don't, I can hit show, and I'll be brought to that area where I can make the change. So this was segment 3 of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 3 right here. So this is just a text note over the top of the dot or of the period instead of the actual value. So now I can come over here, click on this dot, and replace, reset it back to using the actual value, and now make my change. Okay, and if you need to adjust the rounding, adjust the rounding. If we're really off by 3/4 of an inch, let's shift things around and get it right. So, and there's different filters and different ways you can kind of parse down this list to only show things that are overridden or certain fields that have been overridden, so that you're not trying to scan the entire file. Me personally, I'm always going to scan the entire first thing and just give me everything. I'll go back, and if I don't have a lot of overrides, maybe then I'll filter it down to show me, key fields. But I love this tool. So every time I make a change, I can do this, run it again. That one will get removed from the list. I can save the report out and send it to someone else and say, hey, you deal with this, or at least keep it for my records, to see how things have improved or how things have not improved. Compare a couple of reports together. But then once I've gone through my cleanup in this case, and say I cleaned all these up, maybe I'll take another quick snapshot with Project Snapshot Exporter, and update my Power BI files to now show that today we've cleaned this up. It's no longer an issue on our project file. So there's some ways to go about doing this. And now The beauty of the snapshot tools, whether it's Model Compare or Project Snapshot Exporter, is you can schedule those. So and maybe you're running them every Wednesday night at 10 p.m., let's say. So I'll know that in a couple of days, I've got another process running. By the end of the week, I'll have an updated report. So that gives me a couple of days to kind of work through all this cleanup. So part 2, next tool, is Import Link Manager is what I want to cover next. And the reason why I want to cover this one is because oftentimes linked files aren't always configured ideally, and things are imported to a view, potentially, whether it's an image or some type of a CAD element. It's an import instead of what should be a link, or maybe I'd have just too many images imported in and they're not really being used. So there's a couple of different things that I might want to address with proper link management. Revit's manage links works, right? I can reload, I can add links, remove links, but that's about it. There's not a whole lot to do there, and it's all certainly one at a time. The nice thing about Import Link Manager is I can manage all my links at once, especially with like all my Revit links at once, all my CAD links at once, especially if they're all linked from the same folder. It makes it super easy to do. Now, and I've got different ways of handling it. So good, nice big overview here on the first page shows me all the files that are referenced into my project. All DWGs, all RVTs, any image file, PDF, you name it. And it'll tell me how it's been brought in. Is it an import or is it a link? And if it's a Revit file, how is it linked? Is it an overlay or is it attached? What workset it was placed on? And if it was not, if it was imported, it may have been imported into a specific view. If it's on a sheet, if it was linked to a sheet, we can find out that information, what sheet number it was on, what type of file. And if it's Revit, we can now make it room bounding, pinned for everything. So there's a few things, but this list can get unruly, especially on a large project where maybe you've got 20 other Revit links and, maybe 20 other image files loaded in and 20 CAD files brought in, and, you get the picture. So we've got different tabs for managing those different file types. So here's all my imports, there's all my links. We can break it down by Revit links versus CAD links. So a couple of different ways to go about it. With Revit specifically, what I like here is I can find out what everything is. And it'll tell me what workset it's on and what sheet. If it, with Revit, you're always linking to the model, not to a specific view. So some of these will be redundant, will be not necessary. What I really like about this is the room bounding and the pinned options and the ability to change the work sets. So my structural model is supposed to be my room bounding file, which I've got, but then I've got this other one down here. Not really sure what that is yet. And so I'm gonna have to go dig in and find out what that is. It's got the same file size as my structural model, which is a little concerning. Now, so what's great about this is I can, and you get it on both tabs here, but I can expand the file location to get the name. So here I've got 8101 34th S23, so that's my structural. It's the same file. So at some point this got copied and duplicated in potentially even in the same place. That happens from time to time. One's on the right work set, one is not. So I'm gonna guess that this one was the copy. I don't need it, I'm gonna remove it. So instead of having to go track it down and figure out which one it is, I've done it here. So I don't have to pick through my model. and find it out that way. Because you may not, at least in Revit's managed links, it's kind of hard to tell which one is which, especially when the name is just a number. Now, I can also come through here and say, well, my Revit links need to be pinned. So I'm going to pin them all. So I can select all 4 links, hit pin, whether they're visible in the view or not, whether they're loaded or not. In this case, they're not even found, yet I can still pin them. And because I know where some of these files are, I can reload and fix them up. So I have the ability to do a quick little reload from to make sure we're getting the right file. And so I can pick a folder and go browse to the folder where I've got these files saved on my C drive. It's a great way to do things. And hit OK. And if it finds them in there, it's going to reload them for me. Now, I don't believe I've upgraded all 3 of these yet. In fact, I don't think I've upgraded any of them. So we're going to try that again. Oh, I just did that. I'm going to just slow down. I'm clicking too many buttons now. There we go. And now, there we are. So now I can grab this explicit file. I can also do this one at a time if you'd like. And let me grab my Revit models down here, 2023, and the M model is there. There we go. Oh, I see what's going on here. I didn't rename these. So I can't just do a swap reload from folder because that M20 file technically doesn't exist in this location anymore. So I have to physically find the file, which is fine. Now, the last piece here is that I wanted to highlight is this swap reload from BIM 360. So I've got one other file off to the side here. Where did it go? Way over there. Okay, here we are. So what's beautiful about this is I have the ability now to, if I start a project and upload it to, got all my links in there, but then it's decided we need to coordinate using BIM 360 or Autodesk Construction Cloud. I need to be able to manage that link too. Well, with Import Link Manager, you can. And if you do have stuff in the cloud, it'll report it as such. And it'll tell you, yes, you have this cloud file here. And we have an option to swap reload from BIM 360. So as long as the files are up there and you get your consultants to put their files up, or you get the architect to put it up there, and the structural engineer, and as the mechanical designer, I now need to reload those in. We can do all that. Just you might have to do a quick login for one time to do it, and it's just your Autodesk stuff. And if you have our tools, there's a connection built in where you can sign in, get yourself access, and then utilize the tools to link it all together. Now, I'm in Office Building 23. Here we go. So now, well, I made the mistake of grabbing a file that I already had linked up. So let's grab this guy, which is my M20 again. How about that? And since I've signed in once, I don't have to do it again unless you physically click log out. There's my M23 model. We'll hit OK. It'll do the reload. We're good to go. So we've got some pretty good capabilities here when it comes to managing your links. This also works with CAD links if you need to, CAD files get rearranged or you want to convert from an import to a link. We can certainly do that. Oh, you see, it converted that mechanical model to a cloud model now. So now I've got 3 instead of 2. Exactly what I'm looking for. This one, what was this one again? Oh, how about that? More duplicates. So let's get rid of that guy. And just for fun, I don't need to do this in this case, but I'm going to. We can change work sets, right? So this particular file is my architectural site file. It's on just my Revit link work set. I personally don't like that. Now, I would have called it site. So in this case, I'm just going to move it to my site work set just to show that it can be done. So there's different ways to manage it, clean things up, remove the duplicates, and if there are CAD links or CAD imports, we can convert that to a CAD link. So here, with this particular file here, I have the ability to swap reload from a file. So this particular one can be anywhere. I've got some settings here. So I'm looking for B-02. Oops, I grabbed the wrong folder. It's up here. B02, hit OK. I get my import/link CAD file settings, just like you would with Revit when bringing them in. And this is where you convert it to a link. And it's going to remove the import, replace it with the link file. We have the ability to preserve placement. So if it's already located properly and in the right spot, we can preserve its positioning, stick with the color schemes that we've linked it in with, and manage layers, the same stuff. And it's going to take care of business for me, so I don't have to worry about it. I'm not going to change the host view. I don't want to touch anything. So, good ways to deal with some of this stuff without having to worry about it anymore. And see, now it's gone. It's a link, which is great. And I don't even know where that file was linked to or imported to. This tool just helps me do it. So that's Import Link Manager. The last tool that I'm showing you guys today is Project Cleaner. Another BIM Manager Suite tool. However, this one is free. Shows up in the free tools list here. So I'm going to go to Project Cleaner. And this will present us with a series of tabs across the top with different sets of things that I can get rid of if I want to. So it breaks it up into, what is that, six things: views, view templates, view filters, my sheets, links, imports, and images. Now, I was just in Import Link Manager managing my links and imports, and I could have deleted everything there. Yes, I could have. Just fine. But not, this is in case you don't have the full manager suite. We've given you access to at least get rid of some of these things. And actually, you may want to use this anyway. This is a great tool for doing some quick cleanup before you send the file off to your consultant or to the architect or to the engineer for them to work in. Or at the end of the day when you're sending it to archive, or if things are just getting messy. This is a great tool to help you clean that stuff up. One example are views and sheet, your views, they can get a little unruly at times, especially our working views. I know I create working sections up and down all day and night. I love them. They're super handy. But instead of reusing the same one over again, I just make new ones. Frankly, because I don't remember where I placed it and which one was mine. So they get left behind. And so now I can use this tool to clear some of that stuff out. Okay, and that's the whole point. So finding various sections, in this case, some of these are labeled accordingly. In my mind, one of my general rules of thumb on a cleanup, especially if I'm familiar with the project, if it doesn't have a legit name, that's the first thing on my list to go. And if you made a view and detailed it but didn't rename it, you should be naming things. And that's a good way to help enforce some of those standards too. If you see something that's not named, tell the team, hey, if you need this, rename it. I'm about to do some cleanup. And that just, across the board. So these are all good. I'm happy with those. Renderings are fine. Buckets of floor plans. Here's one that just says delete me. So let's go ahead and do that. I get some notice that views that are associated with dependent views, so that's awesome. I don't want to get rid of those. But you get the idea. Here's a whole basket full of working views. So let's get rid of those. And we'll just kind of get rid of a few things here and move on. And the whole point is just to be able to grab what you need to get rid of. Empty drafting view, don't need that. Bunch of more working views, let's get rid of those. And we'll stop there. I'm going to hit remove. And in this case, it's just, I've only checked views, so that's all it's going to get rid of. But it also allows us to, it'll remove everything all at once. So since I don't have to do this every single time, I'm going to take a step back and grab a few more things here. So if I, I don't, whoop, there goes one. That's a perfect one to get rid of. The rest seem to be okay, I suppose. Actually, you know what? I don't like the pre-3D naming. Shouldn't be used. And I'm going to get rid of these Navis export views because now I just use the one Navis view. Build all my filters inside of Navisworks. So we'll get rid of all the extras. Filters, I'm not going to use my selection filters, parameter filter only. I'm happy. And, you get the idea. So I'm just going to grab a couple more things just to populate the rest of the list. These are all in use somewhere. No duplicates. We'll leave them alone. I don't have any imports because I swapped it. And for my image files, I have this one waiting in the wind to be placed. It's not actually placed, so we'll dump it. And honestly, I don't like images being used in my Revit model, so I want to have these swapped out so that I can, or redrawn, let's say. Now, and then I'll remove these. Now, one of the nice things about this tool is if you find yourself deleting the same views with the same names or the same sheets or the same view templates, you can actually build a cleanup template of sorts where you can save that selection and delete them later on a different project or even the same project. So if maybe there's a bad view template out there that names, and people use that to name their views, for example, now we get rid of the template and the views from a project when we hit it. And we can load selection files in at any time and just turn around and hit remove. It's going to have everything selected and ready to go, saving us that time. And last but not least, we have a link to the Purge button. So after deleting various items here, we should probably check the Purge area to see how many unused elements there are in my model and get rid of some of that stuff too. So we can click Purge. It will close Project Cleaner. It's going to fire up the Purge command. And there we go. I've got almost 1,700 items to get rid of. Obviously, blind purging isn't always a good thing because now you may have just deleted something that someone was going to use. Or it's going to get used for sure, like your annotations and symbols and stuff like that. But maybe you've got a bucket load of generic models that are just hanging out, or furniture items, or a bunch of detail items that you're not going to use. So go ahead and check a bunch of them, and you know the drill. That's Purge. So, but that pretty much takes care of it for today. So today we recapped data extraction and capturing, reviewing it in Power BI or on our dashboards. And then we've specifically talked about using Import Link Manager and Dimension Checker and Project Cleaner. That was a lot to cover, in a fairly short amount of time. So now, and that's all we got today. So for next week, we are covering part 3 of the series, where we are going to spend some time discussing managing the more elements within the model and making sure the right objects are being used, and if not, how to get those in place, and then how to do a little bit more on the like some data management and data editing on that front. So at this point, I want to say thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate you all. We look forward to having you guys every week, and look forward to seeing you all next week for part 3 of our Clean Up Your Projects and Maintain Standards series.